Thank you, Don Rickles. I've been asked to talk a little bit about the history of the Minnesota Wrestling Club, and it's been a glorious history for me, and we are part of the reasons we're here together tonight is to recognize the glory of so many of our superb athletes from the state of Minnesota, our national champions. In a way, the history of the wrestling club could go back to 1948 when in the NCAA collegiate championships, after the wrestlers and coaches had arrived there, it was announced that they would compete under the Olympic rules. 1948 was the first post-war Olympic Games, and the NCAA was to be the trials tournament that picked the U.S. Olympic team. There was only one man available, so far as we knew, in the whole country. It's Cliff Keen, who was then coach of the University of Michigan, who was explained that he had been at the 1936 Olympic Games, and he would relate to the wrestlers what he remembered of the rules of international wrestling. As you can imagine, there was a lot of consternation, but it started something in our country that we hadn't had for a long time, international wrestling. Soon we, in subsequent years, acquired some French manuals which we translated the international rules. In 1956, it was decided that in addition to working in the freestyle sport, we would try and compete in this game called Greco-Roman wrestling. We had no coaches. We didn't even have a Greco-Roman rule book back then. We kind of made it up as it went along. We were fortunate in finding some immigrants who had come to the United States, who had had some wrestling experience. It was always Greco-Roman experience. And we built on that basis to build a sport that, as you know, won a world championship 4 years ago. We're all very proud of that. I had spent the 1950s working and living in New York City and received my Olympic experience in 1956 when I returned to Minnesota. Some of the wrestlers from the university came to me and asked me to explain the Olympic rules, the international rules. There was nothing in writing even for us to work with. And I worked with some of the athletes, and 1964 we decided we had some good comprehension, so we would go to the Olympic trials, which would be held in New York City, and we put together a Minnesota team and traveled out there with great pride, and were wiped out. Did not win a place, 1964 Olympic trials. Stirred up our competitive juices, however, so we came home, worked hard. 1965, we took a team to the national championships, run under the international rules. Wiped out again. Now we got mad. When I returned, I called a meeting of all of the local coaches, high school coaches, mostly there were a few college coaches there. I said, you know, fellas, if we work on this, we can have fellas on the Olympic team. We can bring our athletes around and they can prosper and win for us and wrestle internationally and represent our nation. And is Frank Huelskamp here? Frank was one of the persons at that meeting. Frank, are you here? I always love talking with Frank because several times he's told me, Alan, when you had that meeting, as soon as it was over and we left, I told all the other fellas, all the other coaches, that guy's crazier than hell. But next year we went to the national championships with our team and we won. And we won a string of 16 national championships in the ensuing 20 years. And it was one of the greatest experiences of my life to do that. And it was all Minnesota kids. I'm not talking about importing wrestlers or hiring wrestlers from other states or nations or colleges to wrestle for us. It was all hometown talent from all of us. And the thing that made it so wonderful was the restoration of the competitive inspiration, the competitive juices that it brought to all of us. Wrestling is a wonderful sport, and most of us here, so many of you here, can testify that it doesn't end when you graduate in high school, and it doesn't end when you have to end. It doesn't have to end when you finish college. It's a sport that can go on for many, many years, and many people here in this room can testify as to the benefits, some of which Mike Chapman told us about. And it's a wonderful thing for our nation. It's a wonderful thing for us individually. Some of the highlights of the club itself were the year 2 years when we had wrestlers on the three-step podium in a weight class, and all three wrestlers in the weight class were from the state of Minnesota. It was exciting when we took, one year we divided our Minnesota team into an A team and a B team and went to the national championships and won the first place and the second place team trophies. The highlight probably was in 1976 Olympic Games in Montreal, Canada, when 6 of the 10-man Olympic team were wrestlers. 6 out of 10 wrestlers on the Olympic Greco-Roman wrestling team from the state of Minnesota. And we were extremely proud to have the first American to win a gold medal in the World Championships, in Mike Houck from the state of Minnesota. We've had exciting times, exciting backgrounds, but wrestling is not a one-person sport. You don't find any wrestler who's won a championship or even been a good wrestler without the competition and the partnering with other wrestlers. We do have training partners, and I can tell you from a personal basis that all that I've done and all I've seen accomplished is not done anything done like by myself. I can't claim a bit of individual credit. It's the people in this room who have partnered together, and I'd be proud to say, and with whom I've partnered, that have made it possible to have a team that could have the records we had. As was mentioned earlier, we had a string of 40 years when Minnesota had a wrestler on every team the United States sent into a World Championship or the Olympic Games. 40 years without a break. And we have looked at it. We don't think there's another club in the world that has that record. So I'd like to express my appreciation. I'd like to express my appreciation to the institutions which have helped us. Augsburg, which has done so very much for us, the University of Minnesota, other of our colleges and the high schools. I'm grateful for the people that, in addition to all the wrestlers who've done all that they have without any financial reward at all, have done so much to make our program successful. I'd like to make a special tip of my hat to our friend Vern Gagne, who in the early years of our club was the only financial support we had. I'd like to also say thanks to my friends Tom Press and Pat Halloran, who wrestled in the early years of the club and now have become substantial financial contributors of the club. There are hundreds of names of team members and friends whose names I'll never have time to list nor enumerate. But I want to thank all of you who have competed here, and thanks very much to all of you for being here tonight. Thank you.